Craig?
Yep. 222. You hear me out of that guy? 1 2. Check 1 2. Okay.
He'll tell you. Testing, testing, testing. 1 2 3. Testing, testing, testing. 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 Testing, testing. Table mics.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, now. Okay.
Mic 3. Mic 3.
Hello? That's what's normal. Hi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
1 2 3. Hello.
Test, test, test. Test. That's better.
Yep.
Hello? That works too.
So the deck should be in there. Yeah.
No, you can turn it back. I can still see it. Yeah, just so you can see it.
So good evening, all. Hope everyone can hear me. I just want to also welcome those who are at home listening via live stream and viewing us. My name is Roseanne Bailey. I'm with Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights with the Toronto Police Service. I wanted to just thank our community partners, the JCA, Jamaican Canadian Association, CAFCAN, the Black Creek Community Health Center, as well as YACE, for hosting us tonight. We do have a land acknowledgement that will be read by Rochelle Nelson. So we'll start off.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to start by honoring the land that we are on, which has been the site of human activity since a time immemorial. Toronto or Toronto is a traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee speaking nations, the Huron-Wendat, Petun, Seneca, Mohawk, and most recently, the Mississauga of the First River Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, and this is home to many Indigenous and First Nations across the Turtle Island, including the Inuit and Métis. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and allied nations, are agreements to peacefully share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right in all our relations, and the land and with each other. As we go forward, we recognize that the voices of all people have not been always acknowledged. It is our chosen duty to hear all voices and provide them with a space and place to be heard. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this generation and generations past. I would like to acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as part of the transatlantic slave trade, and therefore, I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. As an addendum to this land acknowledgement and recognition to the 7,000 plus lives that continue to be uncovered at the 139 residential schools in Canada, many of which have not been excavated, and the last which have been closed in 1996, when most of us were still alive. This is not history. We are living with and as well as benefiting from the consequences of these institutions. And I ask now, in honor of all those lives lost and responsibilities we all have moving forward towards truth and reconciliation, that we hold a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank all of you for coming out today. It's the first snowy day, the reminder that this is Canada, and we were living in a dreamland for a few weeks, thinking that we were going to escape the snow. My name is Claudia McCoy. I am the principal of Upsurgence. It's an engagement organization and firm that I launched precisely for moments like this, where we can find connectivity gaps and close them through community engagement. Today, we're going to be focused on talking about race-based data collection and how we can use data in a positive way, in an effective way, to transform institutions or communities in a way that fosters equity. And I know from talking to many of you today and in this is the second town hall, and over again we're hearing, we want change. We've told you this a million times over, we want change. And what I want to making sure that we hear today as a facilitator is that we listen, we find those gaps, and we figure out how we're going to be doing implementation. I'm actually happy to say that from what I'm hearing so far, that that's exactly what the goal of all the people in the room. The question is how, the question is when. With that being said, as the land acknowledgement, thank you for saying it so wonderfully, acknowledges that we have a lot of trauma that we need to address, and we need to work together through with each other. We have two people, two therapists right here. If you guys can stand and wave, Leo and Rochelle, no, just Gillette, sorry, that I think is a brilliant to have you. First of all, thank you for your service. If anything triggers you, and the word trigger is actually, what does that mean? So I know when I see a lot of imagery and hear a lot of the narratives, it can be painful, and we want to make sure that we are able to address our pain and trauma in a way that actually fosters healing. So if any of the narratives are something that reminds you of experiences that you have, and many of us have had experiences, we need to have a vehicle and support systems. So thank you so much. And talk to them. Talk, please. With that being said, this is a room where we are to really listen to each other. There are things that need to be said. Please say them. Say them in a respectful manner, but say them. Say them as forcefully that you need to say them, but again, make sure that we are saying things in a way that we can be constructive. With that being said, I want to also let you know, because when I walk into a room, I always want to know where's where. There's a washroom for the women right here. There are men and women as well. No, oh, not the one there. No. Oh, sincere. Thank goodness we have you. There's a men further back. And if you need to use the facilities, please do so. Like I said before, this is the second of 7. The first one we had was at Albion. Yeah? And we had a very dynamic conversation. And I'm expecting that to be. I also want you guys to just indulge me with one fact. This room is a testimony of community leaders coming together. JCA is a symbol of building a safe space, and it's been here for 60 years. I just would like us to have a round of applause for the fact that we have this. This is what can happen when communities come together and work together. So thank you so much for also having us. Moving along. As I said, this is a day and an evening to really explore race-based data collection and how it can foster equity. The floor is yours, Colin.
Oh, are we going to introduce ourselves?
Yes.
My name is Colin Stairs. I'm Deputy Chief of Information and Technology. That's in other places known as the Chief Information Officer. I'm next in seniority to the chief, and I work closely with the chief, and I work with him on these issues of equity and trying to use our data better, trying to use it to gain insight, and I'm also working very. A big part of my job is how to change the organization and where to change it to. So using digital technologies, using information technology as the catalyst. But changing the organization processes, how we do things, and just how we connect with our communities. So a pretty broad mandate, but that's what I do at the service. I've got a background in healthcare. I wasn't with policing most of my career. Our last 2.5 years I've been with the Toronto Police Service, but before that I was working in hospitals and healthcare with CAMH, mental health organizations. And certainly there's a lot of crossover between those two worlds, and a lot of crossover between mental health and anti-racism issues. So that's who I am. I want to thank you for having us here. We're here to listen. We're here to have a conversation. Data gets us a certain distance, but it doesn't get us all the way. We got to put a story on top of that data, and we got to agree on what that story is and what to do, and how to do what we need to do. Okay. Beside me, Andy Singh. Andy.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Singh. I'm the unit commander at 31 Division. I previously was at 51 Division downtown, so I have come here about 4 months ago. I have met some of the people in this room at community events, and it's always great to see you again. We also have in the room my second-in-command, Inspector Don Terrio. We also have neighborhood officers that are here, from Staff Sergeant Peter Wallace, Greg Mangiardi. Please say your name if you could stand up, and just so that the community can see you. Officer Harpal Singh, we have Leo Addo, and we have Havni Dami, and we also have a new officer. He just joined a few weeks ago. It's a new exposure for him, Salim Mustafa, who also, yeah, literally, and I'm sure it's quite overwhelming right now, but I think he's enjoying the moment. So, and you know what, and that's what we're trying to do. And as we talk about action, to the deputy's point, these are the actions we're taking. Is we're starting to introduce our officers very early on as to what's important. And I have a very strong background in investigations, but I also have a lot of background in community work, and community is where our solutions are, and that's where our officers see it firsthand. Is that we're truly invested as an organization. We're all in. But it all starts with us and how effective we are with the community. So thank you for having us here. Thank you for having me here as being somebody who's here at 31 Division. And I really look forward to having conversations not only through this method, but even after one-on-one. So thank you. I'll turn it over to the doctor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Mai Fan. I am the Equity Data Scientist. I've been with the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit within the service for about 3 years, really helping to drive this strategy and make it work for you. I'm here not alone. There is a fantastic, committed team behind this work, and they're in the room. I wanted, if you can wave and say hi to everyone. There's Nicole, Salia, Ruben, Grace, Miha. So we're here to really speak to you about what we've been doing with the race and identity-based data collection, what we found in the 3 years we've been working towards this moment, and where we're going next. And this is not an end game. The end game is racial equity, right? There's no end to it, right? Even after we've collected, analyzed, come to solutions, we need to continue to monitor whether the changes we've put in place is actually doing what it's supposed to do and is resulting in the positive outcomes that you want to see. So the conversation we're going to have today will really help us drive towards those goals. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your ideas and your thoughts, and also your questions about what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Thank you. We are here also because of the mobilization of community leaders. And so I just want to have the community leaders that are involved, the JAFCAN, there's the CAFCAN, come forward, as well as a representative from JCA, Black Creek. If you guys can all come up so we can all hear a bit.
Good evening, everyone. This is fantastic to see this community here in the room as we enter into conversation with the police. This is an opportunity for us to dialogue, for us to talk to each other, for us to gain an understanding of what's happening in our community. Yes? And so here is an opportunity, and it is quite unique. Here we have the police, and we also have the voices of the Black community. So we just want to say, on behalf of CAFCAN Social Services, thank you for being in the room. And on behalf of our Executive Director, Floydine Charles Friedel, who's unable to join us this evening, thank you. Just want to welcome you. We're looking forward to the conversation. It is a good place to start. It is a conversation where we get to learn from each other. So welcome, and thank you for being here.
Don't forget to say a little plug. Tell me what you do. Say what you do.
Okay, so yes, so my name is Jennifer Casme, and with me is my colleague, and he is here right there, and now I'm drawing a blank, Dwight Townsend, and he's got the camera going, so he is here, and I am the Mental Health Support Services Manager here at CAFCAN. So we're here to support you, and as we journey through this the many challenges that we may face. The Black community is standing with you, and as we work in collaboration with the police, they share the information. We're going to be hearing about strategies, right, of how we can get to a better place. Yes? Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you and good evening. My name is David Betty. I'm the president of the Jamaican Canada Association. And pretty much it's Roy Williams, our first president, would remind us that he says, you always got to keep your foot on the pedal. You got to keep pressing. And I think Dr. Fan says it well, that this is work that you got to keep doing. So we're happy. JC is known for a lot of party, but this is really where the work is. And so we're happy that you can be in this space to do the work. It's a lot of work, but it's useful work. It's work that's necessary. So we're happy that we can be a part of this and provide a space for this all to happen. So as we deliberate, let's remember, let's keep our foot on the pedal. Let's keep pressing.
Thank you so much. Are you from Black Creek? Yes. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Prescott from Black Creek Community Health Center. Really pleased to be here with members of my team, Josie, one of our managers, some outreach workers, Andrea, Rochelle, a community health worker, Mahari, a social worker, a navigator, and Patrick, our youth programs coordinator. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. But also, as I look around this room, lots of community members that we work with every day and support, as well as police officers who are very friendly and helpful to many of us in our programs. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the conversations, which will be hard, because as a Black woman and a mother of Black children, I have had some interactions that have not been positive, and it's very difficult to hear to read the data and to hear that some of what we have felt and experienced in our lives is validated by that data. But as the executive director of an organization in this community, which I care deeply about, I think it's important for us to listen, to dialogue, and to come up with solutions, because every individual in this community is valuable and important, and we have to do the best we can collectively to ensure the best health and well-being for them, which is what the mandate of Black Creek Community Health Center is. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for your work. Is there someone here from the YAAACE? Okay, that's winter for you. So that being said, I just also wanted to point out that there's a microphone here, and there's a microphone right behind the officer, right behind you. But first, we're going to go through a presentation and to walk through the narratives around race-based data and how TPS is going to be using that data in an equitable way. And so, Colin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to start with a bit of an acknowledgement. TPS hasn't gotten this right, and we've faced calls, decades of calls, to address the racism issue, to measure it accurately, and we've underperformed in that. We haven't done it, and haven't done it to the standard that we ought to have. And the chief, back in June, apologized for that, and wanted to continue and acknowledge that while we were making our best efforts, we've got a long history of not making our best efforts, and that's something that we have to make up to all of you. Also, that what we're digging at here is, and we're trying to build information and insight into, is painful for a lot of folks. It dredges up issues, memories, interactions that are painful, and I recognize that that will probably be true for a lot of folks in the room here. So I appreciate that you're willing to come to this, as we call it, a brave space, to share and to have the dialogue that we need to have. I also want you to understand that we have a commitment from the board, from the command, of which I'm a part, to work on this diligently and keep working on it. Mai mentioned it, but we don't see this as a project. We see it as a cycle. And as we finish up the race-based data analysis on use of force, we're going to go into the next thing, which is apprehensions and youth diversion. And then after that, we're going to go somewhere else, and we're going to look hard at everything that we do. And part of the conversation is, where do you feel we should be looking and using this sort of analytical data approach next, so that that we have community guidance in what we're looking at and where we're going. What my experience with doing this is that the data only gets us so far. It's statistics, it's very mathy. I'm a big nerd, and I apologize, folks, if I come off as too analytical sometimes. That is the nerd in me. But you know, that's both my strength and my weakness. I get to a certain point and say, well, that's interesting statistic. What does it mean? Building that meaning is what I hope that we do together. And when I talk to different groups ascribe different meaning to the same stats, the same events. And then the next question is, how do we build on that together? What are the answers? What are the changes we need to make in policing that are going to get us to a different result? Maya's going to speak a bit to it, but the results that we have had have changed policy, and they've had a positive impact. But we need more of that, and we need to do that together. So that is both, I guess, my acknowledgement and my hope for what we can do today and where we can go. I'm listening, and I'm taking what I'm hearing here back to the command, back to the chief. I think you were going to walk us through some of the data, some of the key findings next.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the goal of today is to really put our heads together and find solutions so that we can change these outcomes. But before we can do that, let's take a look at what these outcomes are that we're seeing and how they have validated what communities have been telling us and what decades of reports have been showing. And this is our own data. So since 2019, we've worked hard to kind of have conversations about, what we're collecting, help officers understand why we're collecting this data, what the purpose is, and analyze it through a lens that's driven by the questions that community members ask. So our community advisory panel has helped us along the journey to really come up with the questions from their lived experiences, and also working with our members to understand their operational experiences and what questions they have. So one of the things that we found, for example, so one of the approach that we took to understanding use of force and strip search outcomes, which is the first areas that we started. We heard from communities that use of force was a huge concern. Racial discrimination in how we use force, racial discrimination outcomes in terms of who experiences strip searches, right? And so we started there. Those were the important interactions. So I'm going to walk you through our approach for use of force and what we found. One of the things that we found with with what we did was that there was an over-representation, meaning incidents involving Black people, incidents involving Middle Eastern people were more likely to result in force when they had an interaction with police. And those groups were also more likely to have interactions with police. And we also found for other groups, it was different, right? For Indigenous groups, they were more likely to have interactions with police, but when they did, use of force was less likely to happen. And so the experiences of Indigenous peoples was different and stands out from other groups. And for other groups like East Asian, Latino people, they were less likely to have interactions with police, but when they did, they were more likely to have use of force applied in those interactions. And so those 4 unique patterns, the 4th pattern being that interactions involving white people and South Asian people were both less likely to result in force, but also they were less likely to have interaction with the police in the first place, right? And so it tells us that we need to focus on different aspects of policing to help drive down the negative outcomes. We need to better understand what is happening when we are interacting with Black people, when we are interacting with Middle Eastern people, so that we can have more positive outcomes. And you can see from the chart there, what that looks like in terms of the overrepresentation when compared to the population who have police interactions. And when it comes to strip searches, what we saw was that there were trends across the year that fluctuated in terms of arrests, bookings, and strip searches. And those trends were really impacted by changes in strip search policy that we introduced in October. So this is a story, strip search was a story of the positive impact of policy and procedure changes, better training for officers when they made recommendations and decisions to search somebody. And it also showed that those changes can help us move towards a racially equitable outcome, right? Prior to the policy change, what we found was that arrests that involved white people, Black people, and Indigenous people were more likely to result in a strip search. After the policy change, what we found was that those disparities disappeared, particularly for Indigenous people. So policy change and positive action can make a difference, and we see that in the search of person policy. So that gives us hope, but it also gives us a reason to continue to monitor how we make arrests, how we make decisions to search, so that we can continue with those positive trends and we don't slide back into a situation where we see differences. So I turn it back to, there's more, sorry, before I turn it back to Colin to talk about what are the action items and what do we learn from the analysis, what changes we need to make. I want to point out that around the room, there are more results that you can see from our reports. We did a lot of analysis. And the staff, the team is here to answer your questions if you want to really dig deep into the data, but today is not about the data. Right? Today is about what do we do here on so that we can change what the data is showing us. So now I pass it on to Colin to speak on that point.
So the point, the point I think here is that your voices do matter. And we've been changing even since the last town hall that we had, our approach. There was a fair amount of feedback on what we could have done better, and this town hall is not a carbon copy of the last one. This is an adjustment in terms of how we're addressing things, et cetera. Some of those changes are just how we speak to and how we present some of the material. There have been community members who have been with us through the whole analysis, like every single graph, chart, and hypothesis, and what might be happening, and what is this, and what is that, and can you answer this question blow by blow every 2 weeks with the community advisory panel. And those are folks who are both of the community and also have skills in analytics and analysis. So we've had that group with us. But one of the things we clearly didn't do well was how we engaged the broader community through the whole process. We acknowledged that could have been done a lot better. And even our own CCC, or Community Consultative Group, were critical of us and the engagement that we did with them. So we're going to try and be much more transparent going forward with how we're presenting the data and how we're showing you how we're going about doing the data, who we're including, and how we're having those conversations. And we're going to invite basically everybody once a month to a contact group to hear what's going on and to take feedback on what we should do differently, better, et cetera. So as I say, we're listening, we're changing how we're approaching things, but I think this is also about the Okay, great, we're changing the process by which we're doing town halls. How are we changing policing? And that's what I want to get to with the action plan. The action plan is, sorry.
Yeah.
The action plan we came up with based on what we see in the analysis, what the Community Advisory Panel saw in the analysis, but we recognized that that wasn't okay to just do that with that small a consultation group. There's some things we could get started on that were maybe more obvious, but there's no way that we can develop the plan without you folks, without you hearing, understanding, reflecting, adding to the things that we ought to do, editing them, taking away. So I want to spend a little bit of time and lay that plan out for you in a bit more detail. Bear with me if this is long-winded, but I just want folks to understand what we're trying to do. The first thing is to just listen and understand, right? And so that's what we're here for. And to change the way we're doing this race-based data program to make it much more transparent with more community members, more engaged. Some of the stuff we're doing is super nerdy analytical stuff, as I said, and so not everybody can follow, but we want to make it as accessible as possible, and we want the champions of the community who have those analytic skills to come in and be as involved and engaged and see as much as possible. And that, and I think we have a couple members of the CAP here today. You can talk to them about what the experience was like being engaged in the analysis. So that was a big piece. The next is around governance. So how does the police run itself, and how do we make sure that we're running things properly? So we're increasing the scrutiny that's being subjected to use of force circumstances. So when force is used, it's going to go up to a use of force committee that's going to review all uses of force, and it's going to look at it in this context. We're also, we already have a strip search group that's been looking at the change that you just saw on the graph and driving that change. So this is going to be the same thing, and we're amping up both. So they're both going to be stronger and more powerful within the organization. We're also going to communicate. Actually, this Friday, we're putting publicly, we're posting all the information that underpins this analysis. So people can replicate this analysis themselves, can look at it in different lenses and different lights, and hopefully come back to us and have a conversation about what they're seeing in the data. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted clarification. When you say use of force, is it only for those who are arrested?
No.
So you're in general. So if someone was on a bus and the police hit them but they didn't report it, is that going to be captured in the data?
So the data that we're working off is any reported use of force that's on a form. So in the circumstance where that happened, that might not be reported. I think I'll hand it over to Mai to give you a definition.
Yeah. The informal ones that, like how, so let's say that there's an interaction on the street, but there's no arrest and there isn't anything, but there was some use of force.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I think defining what it is we're collecting is really important, so thank you for bringing that up. So use of force, when we say use of force, it is what is provincially required to report. And those are very specifically defined situations. So the province has, under the Police Services Act, a form that they require all police services to collect information and submit.
So not community. So let's say
that's right.
Something happened to me and I went to report it.
No. It's not coming from community. Every police officer who uses force, that's defined in this way. So every time a physical force, like a punch or a kick, that results in medical attention. So a nurse, ambulance has to come to the scene and treat the person. It also includes every incident where a baton is used, pepper spray is used, a gun is drawn, pointed, discharged. A use of force form, right. If they don't go to, if there's no ambulance at the scene, there's no medical treatment, then we may, it would be up to the division supervisor to request, okay, officer, in this situation, let's just submit a use of force anyway, right? Sometimes that can do, it's over-reporting, right? More than is minimally required by the province, is what I mean. But we don't systematically collect those kinds of incidents in the use of force form.
So the one thing I can add, is my mic working? Thank you. The one thing I can add is, so there's many other checks in place. So first of all, we have officers that have body-worn cameras now. So that's accounted for. And use of force incidents, the officer has to explain when they used any force, right? So although it's not recorded provincially, as an organization, we track it. And there's supervisors that check into that, and they review the body-worn camera footage. So these are all instances that, as much as we're talking about a specific data threshold, what Doctor is referring to, it's not that those other incidents are not tracked. They're tracked internally, and there is a professionalism and an accountability piece that does result from that.
So basically what you're saying is there's a misconduct if someone were to use force and not report it.
Absolutely.
But do they actually add to the data that you would see in these reports?
No, so I think that's the point, is that there's a difference between what we're using for this analysis is really that provincial threshold that the superintendent's talking about. But below that, like all the other kinds of force that's used, there are other mechanisms that track it, but it doesn't form part of our analysis. So even when we look at that higher threshold, the provincially required definition of use of force, we are seeing the overrepresentation of Black people in those uses of force, even by different types of calls for service and different nature of the incident. And you'll see that in some of the graphs around the room.
And just to follow up, is there a community component that can actually bring an incident to the provincial level? So if I picked up the phone, and how does that work, or no?
So maybe we should just explain briefly the complaint process.
Yeah.
So if there was a complaint made, so the example you raised was there's no complaint made, so it could be invisible. But if there is a complaint made, then there would be an investigation under that complaint. And if there was found that there had been a use of force, and so now we're wearing the body-worn cameras, they're on for every interaction. So we say, oh yeah, that actually happened. That would then be a PRS investigation, internal investigation. But it would also result in documenting that use of force. So it would become part of that data set at that point.
And just one more point to that. Sorry. They're just having a conversation.
I think the question was, how often does that happen?
So there's two components to that. So to the deputy's point, so there is the professional standards investigation, but then there's the Office of the Independent Review Director, the OIPRD, which is basically an oversight agency that has nothing to do with the police. So somebody can go right to the OIPRD and put forth a complaint, and it's investigated. So there's multiple layers of oversight. It's not as perhaps there's not that gap because it's not represented in the data here. We, and from a policing standpoint, treat that very seriously. And body-worn camera has to be on for every interaction. That's tracked. That's not only tracked by the investigators, but it's also tracked as a unit management. And so those gaps are very little. So that invisible part where, let's just say to your point, somebody got roughed up and it did not make a report, the person who is subjected to this, there's many mechanisms internally and externally that would be identified, and it would be dealt with through misconduct.
So I think I take the point, though, and I just want to address this. The underlying point is there could be underreported, and also the question of how. Sorry, do you want to come to the mic?
I'll get her.
Okay. So there is a place below, a threshold below which the data doesn't make it into this, right? So someone puts the cuffs on too tight. They're more roughly handled, but it isn't actually a use of force. That kind of, where's the threshold? There's a fair amount of conversation around how do we measure that and how do we capture that. It actually probably needs more subtle approaches rather than you've got to make a complaint to the OIPRD. And so that's some of the stuff that I'm looking at, and I think we should all discuss, is how do you create those mechanisms? So one of the things I'll get to in monitoring is to address specifically that, okay? In terms of, I'll just want to get back on this. Is everybody okay, or do we have a question or comment?
You do have one question over there, and then I can ask the question that
Okay.
we have here. I can probably ask the question over here just so, because it's still on the same. And let me know if I interpreted it incorrectly. The question was, what is the statistics of officers that are found guilty in that versus those who don't? Is that correct?
Yeah, like basically, like, yeah, like, okay, the officers investigated, like, what are the statistics that they're found guilty or not found guilty? Because you know there's guilty ones, right? Like, what are the statistics of that?
I don't have the stats on me at this time. What I can tell you is that there is a process of internal investigation, PRS, and they go to a tribunal. It's like an internal court to be charged with this kind of activity. If it's minor in nature, sometimes it will be resolved at the division, but it would go on the record of that officer. Andy, do you want to elaborate? I'm sorry, but there's certain protections in law about sharing that. One of the things the chief and I are talking about is how do we make that whole disciplinary process more transparent.
Statistics in our neighborhood and stuff, right? So it's relevant, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
What in police services with the civil people, right? It's relevant. That's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're asking questions, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying the question is not fair. The question is totally fair.
I'm asking you a statistic, right?
And I'm saying I don't have that statistic. And also what I'm working on with the chief and with the guy, the staff superintendent who runs the PRS, the Internal Investigations Group, is how we can make that transparent. There's certain protections for officers under the law, and we have to work around those to be able to say, like, there's 180 complaints that come in every year, and of those, so many result in this kind of discipline, so many result in this kind of discipline, right? Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that that's an ask from the community, and we're hearing that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was one question at the back. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we good? Are we good? Okay.
Yes, good evening. I intended to have several questions. Yes, of course, of course. So to start, my first question is, a lot of this came out of addressing systemic racism. And this helps me because the same thing that's going on right now is done on the macro and in other areas, right? And they try to compartmentalize and divide to keep the people conquered because we've already been conquered in that, colonized or colonialized in that sense. So what are we going to do to address and what support are we going to be given to address and to correct the systemic racism? Because systemic, when we say systemic, it's a system. We've addressed it's by design. And this is what got us here. A lot of this other stuff, like I am with, as a representative, what this flag represents, we are that story, or a very large part of that story, right? So I'm trying to speak on that behalf. I'm not asking you to do anything for me. I'm asking, what are we going to do to deal with the systemic racism and its design? How are we going to deal with that? Nothing, like, I don't want anything from you if we're not going to do anything with that, because anything you give me under that is still a problem, and that is the example. So when my other questions come up, we'll probably be addressed, but to start off with that one. Thank you.
No, I don't think it's about that. So just, I'm going to play back what I'm hearing from you, which is it's not enough to have a partial solution to systemic racism. We've got to get the whole thing, and it's not done until basically everybody's treated in the same way, and there is no there's no difference in how we administer justice.
Well, yes, that is obviously the goal from since, as a Rastafari, since the Emperor Haile Selassie helped found the United Nations. And then that's another example of what's been going on, misuse of force rather than power, because there's no power, there's no even intelligence when you really check it out. Learning respect for another person and human rights, if that's an issue, we know, you all should know who've gone to school, those intelligences do correlate to your other intelligences, hence everybody's on strike, right? So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not really asking you all, like, yes, that is the goal. If we were doing that in the first place, we probably would not be here, right? But
so I just want to be clear.
So to be clear, what are we going to do to dismantle the systemic racism? Because after we leave here, we're still oppressed, and you're the cop. So we should be calling you to get the people violating our rights, but you're the one who's violating our rights.
So we're looking at issues of how to address systemic racism, right? And there are, I believe there are 38 recommendations
38 so far.
Around data. So maybe we should just walk into getting onto those 38 and then we can get back. That's the core question that we're here today, is how we're going to use policy and community mobilization to actually address systemic racism.
So, and I understand that. I understand we're going to get to it. But yeah, I've tried to identify that what's been going on is less than ineffective, but when it comes out, it's going to come out. The same accountability and transparency some people are asking of them is not given to the community, and Marcus Garvey is that story. So we'll get there.
We're talking about transparency and across the board, within the organization and within the community across the board. And I think this is what we need to develop, that partnership. The key question then is the 38. Let's walk us through the 38 recommendations, and let's collectively figure out how are we going to implement, and are they going to be effective? And I think, Mai, you mentioned that there has been some positive impact. So let's focus on how we can actually get it done, because that's what we need. We need action at this point. The floor is yours.
Okay. We built all that, okay. So what we've focused on is only part of policing, right? Race-based data is looking at use of force and strip search, but that doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about all the other things that are going to get us to a solution. Okay, and as I say, the data gets us so far. It kind of lights things up, but it doesn't tell the whole story, and we need your help to get there. And the last bit of the story is going to be carried on faith, because it's how you explain the data and what's going on. That's part of the conversation, and building a plan that we can all get behind is really what it's about. So we've had a lot of conversations since I've been at TPS about training and how do we help with training. There's a bunch of stuff that we're doing. I call out the adverse childhood events. For those of you who don't do social work or don't know what that is, basically it's the traumas that children experience as they're growing up that affect them throughout their life. And all of us probably have at least a few notches in the adverse childhood events. But some people have a lot of them, and it really puts them in a bad place. So training our officers on that, is to examine themselves and understand what motivates them and what hurt they have, and also to build empathy and sympathy for those who are impacted by those adverse childhood events and who've grown up and are now facing them as subjects. We're looking at our coach program. So our young officer, you got a coach? And so the coach program is really about getting our new officers oriented to policing. Okay, what we're identifying in that is it's not really part of the solution. So it's probably part of the problem, and it needs to get overhauled, right? So overhauling the coach program is one thing that we're doing to make it more community-oriented and to make it more about being aware of all the issues that we have and being anti-racist as opposed to just neutral. Right? So that's a big part of the change around training. There's a whole list of changes we're making at the college in how we train our officers, what kind of scenarios we present them, how do we teach them about their own biases, the biases that they're carrying into their activities. In terms of process and the workflow, we're going to have a mandatory review of all use of force body-worn video, right? So it's every time there's a use of force, now we have body-worn camera, so we've got a recording of that use of force. And it's going to be reviewed every single time. For training officers, it's also going to be reviewed and there's going to be a debrief. For everybody else, there's a debrief if we find something that's a conversation that needs to be had. And then it's going to go up to that governance committee for the whole service to look at that use of force incident and understand what was wrong with it. Was it not just justified, but was it correct? Okay. In terms of monitoring, we want to look at the officer performance report. So this is the report card for cops. And right now it's quite heavily focused on enforcement actions and less on community actions, right? So more how many arrests did I make and not how many referrals did I make to youth services and how did I provide service more on the enforcement. So re-looking at that and how we measure officers and how we incent them, like what makes a good cop is really the question that I ask when we're thinking about the officer performance report. And we need to look at that, and we need to look at that in partnership with community. And my job is to build the systems that will actually measure that, right? So how do we measure whether the officers are making referrals to community agencies and that those referrals are actually helping the folks? That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. And I want to hear your ideas on what you think our officers should be measured on, knowing that that measurement is going to result in those folks being promoted to sergeant, being promoted to staff sergeant and inspector, and ultimately they wind up being Andy Singh here on the stage. We're going to be doing a lot of that monitoring work around the officer performance report. The other thing I'd like to do is have a post-interaction survey. So we go out, we meet with the folks in the community. The big thing that we've been hearing is, I'm not going to lodge a complaint because I'm going to see that guy tomorrow, and I don't need that, and it's putting myself at risk. So I don't want to lodge a formal complaint. Right? But I don't know if you've ever been getting an email after you got a service that said, "How did we do today?" Something as simple as that, and what made you give us the score that you gave us? Well, you did kind of badly because that officer was really disrespectful to me. That feedback loop, not a hammer like the SIU or the OIPRD or the PRS, but a screwdriver that we can turn the adjustment, we can get better coaching and feedback to our officers that what they're doing is off. Or also we have challenges with officers with post-traumatic stress injuries. They see a lot of stuff, and people with PTSI can sometimes be the hurtful people that hurt. So we've got to detect that early, and you being a part of that detection process is super important. Yeah, we got a question.
So does that PTSD or whatever affect their job that they're doing? Does something trigger them in the neighborhood to make them affect a different way towards the youth?
So that's pretty much the nature of PTSI. Post-traumatic stress injuries, just briefly, for those. Andy, you want to answer that one?
Something triggering to make him set off and do something different or assault the youth because he's having a traumatic effect? Something triggered him?
Right, so I think first we have to acknowledge police officers are human beings. Right?
Wait. Hold on. Let him respond.
Right, so 100%, as human beings, they can react. And that's something that we're trying to get better at, to Deputy's point. And I can tell you the conversation around training as much as we're trying to recognize PTSD on our side, we're also educating our officers that when they serve the community, that trauma is invisible. And this is a real conversation, when they're serving racialized and marginalized communities, when they arrive at the door, and this is training that's happening at the college, that the individual could have severe trauma that's invisible to them, and that they need to have the compassion and the empathy. And it starts with anti-Black racism training, it starts with unconscious biases training, but it also starts with, as this young officer here, they spent a week in the community with community leaders, actually being in the spaces, and it all comes down to the same thing, which is educating their mindset on how they actually provide service and how they understand what their part is, how are they a solution, how are they a guardian to that community, right? So to answer your question, ma'am, that's what we're trying to get better at.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. Okay, from your perspective, now look at the youth perspective. They have PTSD too.
That's what I was just saying.
Surrounded by like guns, violence, murder, drug dealing. You understand? So we're coming from the same place you're coming from.
Right.
So as much as you want us to understand you have to understand these youths as well, right?
I
Right.
think that, yeah.
Sorry.
I think that's exactly what he was just saying, that they need to have that training, to have that sensitivity on the ground. And so that process is a process that is not only that I believe.
It's been going on for a while.
Yes, yes. And it's not going to be ending tomorrow.
I know it's not.
It's not. And so the thing is two ways. One of the things that I'm hearing is that the community needs to rally.
Like simply, like we want to work with you guys.
We all have to listen, though.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
No, but you have, yeah. We all have to listen, though. Sorry, and you were saying? The floor is yours. Yes.
I do work for Blackbeard Community Health Center. Today I'm sitting down as a community person from the Jane and Finch Unity Organization.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
I've been working with officers in 31 Division. I've been through around 4 or 5 different superintendents that I've collaborated with. My biggest issue with officers is that the job, when they put in officers and introduce community leaders, I don't say we're community leaders, I just say we're engaging. We're all together as one. So we don't say who leads who. We're all one.
Fair enough.
So as a community person that engages with other community members, our biggest problem is when we're introduced to neighborhood officers. And we're introduced to neighborhood officers, we as community people now, we get engaged with those neighborhood officers. We bring those neighborhood officers to engage with the community. But then guess what happens 5 months later? All of those officers that we've just engaged, that could pass by, they say 1 or 2.
It's the people online can't hear. That's the problem. I'm so sorry. I know, I'm so sorry.
Okay, hi again. My name is Andrea Tabner. I'm a community leader. I work with the Black Creek Community Health Center, and I also have an organization called the Jane and Finch Unity Organization that promotes against gun violence. So, for the past 6 years, I've been working. For the past 10 years, I've been working very closely with officers. I've worked with 5 superintendents so far. McLeod, Greenway, Liso's a nice one. Rivera just left, and Ronald Connor, he just left. What I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, let's really talk about community engagement. We are here because at the end of the day, we know that there's a problem in the police station regarding Black people. It's not hidden. What we need to do now, as a community with officers and everybody, is tell the police that is here right now, and I'm speaking on majority of Jane and Finch because I've been with a lot of other organizations that has the same problem. No one's listening to us. We are tired of having, Emma Nelson is a community person. She is tired. Are you tired, Emma? of having different officers coming to our community. We engage with the officers, and this has been going on for years. So when you introduce us to 5 or 6 neighborhood officers, that's good. They come into our neighborhood. Some of us are good. Some of them are going to be, majority of them will be friendly. Some of them are not going to be friendly. But like he said, we are humans. Right now, I have a problem with officers that come into our community. I go to them, I tell my community, we have new officers. We have to engage. 6 months later, they're gone. Then now they come to me again. And they say, Ms. Tabner, we'd like for you to come into a meeting because we want you to engage with our new community officers. Of course, I'm doing it because why we do it? The love of our community. Then we come back again. This has been going on for 3 or 4 years. I'm fed up. I'm fed up. Okay. I'm really and truly speaking on behalf of the community that if we want to stop racial discrimination, we need to engage with officers that will be there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, so the officers can get to know the community and know who is who. We have officers that just came in, and when they come into our community, the officers that just got taken off of 6 months, that just got the inside with the community, the engagement. I have built up a engagement with officers and with youths in a way where officers can even come and say to a youth, Andrea Tabner, can you tell her to give us a call because we have to do something? That hasn't happened in the past.
So what you're getting at now is a couple of things that I'm hearing. I want you to tell me if I'm clicking them all.
Okay.
1.
Yeah, 1.
They're asking you over and over again to do the same thing.
Years.
2. The thing that you're clicking on is calling investment, community investment. You take your time and you invest in the partnership with an institution.
Yes.
Wait, hold on, my friend.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're going down the list.
We're going down the list.
So the second thing, so now you as community engagers, you feel like you're investing in the community, in the institutions in the partnership, right?
Yeah.
And that investment gets squandered because they're taking because my hand's not starting now. I'm moving. It's because the cycling of the officers.
It's not consistent.
So I heard something, Colin, that you mentioned about incentivizing rewards. Is there something happening? Don't leave yet. Is there something happening where the officers are they come here in 6 months, they get a bunch of checks and then check marks beside the name, and then it's an advancement going somewhere else? Is there something that we can put in place, or has there been discussions about keeping people in these I call these areas that need special care, right? Right.
Can I say one thing?
Wait, hold on. I just want to finish one. You're not going anywhere yet. So, has there been any discussion around that?
Why don't you go ahead with that?
So to answer the 6-month officer part first, those are new officers that are given an opportunity to work with neighborhood officers. So the neighborhood officers that are here, they've been here for a number of years, but I will explain this to you.
No.
Right, so this is not all the neighborhood team here.
We know that.
Right, but 100%. And you know what? It really speaks to the love that you have. The love that you have for neighborhood officers, which honestly is perhaps the most successful way, right? 100%. But I will tell you this, that as an organization and as Toronto Police Service, we are understaffed, and what that does occur is we have to somehow meet the operational needs. But that doesn't come at the cost of the community. As much as possible as a unit commander, my focus always is to leave the officer with the continuity that they have. And I can tell you the neighborhood officers are fully invested.
I don't think you're getting here with exactly what I'm trying to explain. 5 years, and these are neighborhood officers that the community people are introduced to get them to introduce into community. So what the downfall of this is right now is that when I'm introducing youths and community that we have new set of officers. Those set of officers get familiarized with the faces in the community. They engage with the community. And then now, they're gone.
But I also think it underlines another issue that I think you're alluding to, and can I say it?
Say it.
Is that if you spend that time investing in introducing new officers into the community, and they're, wait, hold on, let me finish the statement, hold on. Right? If that happens over and over again, your community legitimacy starts to wane. Because you're now saying, here's a person that I want you to believe in and to trust into. Hold on, let me, wait. Hold on, my friend. Let me just get through this. Am I not doing a good job?
You're going right.
Okay, then. So here's what I think that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Yes.
That it's not just a question of just the time. It's just that the community, I like to say leaders, but I like your point.
Okay, go ahead.
That actually partners with you. That is now trying to build legitimacy and partnership in the community with you, loses that trust in the larger community when the person they said, hey, this is the dude, this is the man you need to listen to, gets ripped apart from the community. This is the part that I think that we need to look at. And so when I look at the concept of race-based data, in neighborhoods that are higher racialized than others, is there something that shows in neighborhood A, highly racialized, the average year the person, police officers on force is, say, the average is 3 years, as opposed to in a non-racialized neighborhood, right? Or if those two things don't have to be always together, the average year of a police officer is 14 years. Are we capturing that kind of data of like what kind of experience is located in what area?
Yeah, no, so I don't think we do. Like, I think we probably could dig up that stat, but I don't think we do. And I think there's a couple things going on here. One is the Neighborhood and Community Officer Program. I think the fact that you want them to stick around means that's a good program, it's a successful program, right? But the problem is the level of commitment that those officers are making to the communities they're in and the length of time they're spending in it. It's almost like no time is like there's no minimum, right? They're like more is always better, and but like 6 months is definitely not enough,
right?
And the churn is eating away at the relationship rather than building it.
You're saying it to the best of the ability that you can, but it still goes to the fact that you have to look at it that if we have neighborhood officers that we get engaged with and we start engaging to the community, the next set of neighborhood officers might not be the same greed. I'm not saying that. Honestly speaking, you have wonderful officers at 31, but not everybody in 31 is wonderful.
Right. So what if...
I'm just being honest.
What if there was some sort of involvement of you folks in the selection and retention of the neighborhood and community officers?
What do you mean? What did you say?
Well, you want to...
Yeah, yes. Yes.
I spoke with one of the superintendents. This is not the first time I'm saying this.
Yeah.
I've said it in a one-to-one. And when you look back at how many times in the Jane and Finch community, Shoreham, Granarvine, it's every 5-6 months. And I'm being honest with you. Majority of the times it's trickling down. We start losing black officers while it's going down. And then now we have about 7 white officers with 1 black officer. Now we're pushing away youths because they can't really communicate, because now it's not, hey, how's the day going? How are you good? Because you have officers that engage with people in the community.
But I think Colin is hitting on something that you want.
Give it to me.
Take it.
Give it to me.
I think Colin is hitting on the idea that you need to be able to be a part of the co-design process of developing out the program, including retention, including the content of the officers that are part. Am I not hearing this correctly?
Okay.
And so what has to happen, I mean, I haven't mentioned this earlier, but there is a co-design process happening over there, but on a long term, in a real term, deep term, we need to have that co-design process with the community to design and monitor the process. Is that fair?
So, yeah, I think so. I'd maybe say it a bit differently. Like I was talking about officer report cards earlier. Yeah. Like, what if you had a say in the report card, and the report card had a say in whether they stayed a community officer or whether they moved on to other things? Because I'll tell you, I experienced the same thing. Because I run a whole bunch of projects and long-term initiatives, and these guys get switched on me. And so I'm trying to change something, and I explain it to superintendent, et cetera, and then superintendent, et cetera, changes to superintendent such and such. It's a disruptive process. The officers try and move around to get training and to have different experiences, but that might not be the right model, and we might need to change the way we do our human resources to try and be more effective. Right? So that's what I'm hearing, and I think is that.
Are you guys open to a co-design process?
Well, I think like the process, the concept, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that is what we take back and we say, hey, the community is not happy with the churn that we've got in neighborhood officers. I will say one other thing, and I want to ask you a question, right? So we're looking at neighborhood and community officers and spending time as NCOs as sort of anti-racist in its own context. Because once the officers they get to know the community, they see people as people, not as subjects, and they don't come out and they start doing PRU, call to call to call to call, emergency to emergency. But they come out and they meet people, they listen to their issues, they get to know folks. We see that as a positive thing we're thinking more officers should go through that experience. We're just trying to find the bandwidth and, as you say, the staffing to put more officers in those neighborhood and community programs. So if we do that, then they're there for a short time. But we might have like short-timer NCOs and long-timer NCOs. Maybe they need to be paired up with each other. What happens when the short-timer's on there and the long-timer isn't? Like, these are kind of design questions that I think we really should hash out.
Yeah. You know what I think is a good procedure for officers? Because I believe in community engagement. So engaging and collaborating, that's me. So I'm not here to say at the end of the day, I don't need police, or we don't need you around, or you're doing so much stuff bad to black people, because you know what have been done in the past. We're here to try to correct the past and make a difference for the future. So what I'm saying to you as officers right now is that I do appreciate you officers from 31. But appreciating the communities, meaning that if you have an officer that knows the community, pair him up with somebody that doesn't know the community, so both of them can go out and this officer can show this officer. Do not pair up two officers that don't know nothing about the community. That's going to cause chaos. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying, on a community's perspective, neighborhood officers, I respect mostly all of them. Ryan, where are you in the building? Where's Ryan? He's not here. But you have a lot of officers. Ryan. When we talk about officers, we're community leaders here. We respect what you guys are doing in the community. But stop doing it by yourselves and start engaging with us as community members. And then we'll have a better community.
I think we just got like 5 new recommendations.
I've been ready to go. I've noticed there's been a really wonderful conversation happening right here.
No, let's not engage that.
Not engage?
We have another question.
Okay.
I have another 10 minutes or so for question and answer. I do have a schedule, but if the community wants to continue with the question and answer, I will shrink stuff.
Yeah, but before you do, though, I just want to point out that we do have tables at the back, and that's where we really want you to come together and brainstorm these and put together these solutions that we've been discussing in the whole group, and then regroup back and share those solutions that we're coming up with. So we heard it here right now, but I just want to make sure that we give time for that activity as well.
And I also want to know if there's any specific questions around race-based data. The presentation.
What it says, what it means, anything like that.
Patrick?
Okay. My name is Patrick Shaw. I'm with Black Creek Health Clinic. I used to be formerly 27 years with the City of Toronto, so I've been involved in these type of meetings. One of the things that, when I was speaking to friends who were police officers, but also community members, one of the things they said even police officers said, they were tired of these meetings. They wanted to know when some of this data would be actually used in real world. So for a community member myself, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So it kind of gets monotonous when we keep on talking about the same thing, saying we need your information so we can actually impact it in the community. So that would be the first thing. In this real world of things happening instantly, how do you guys want to or should start to use this information, body cameras, whatever it may be, that it can happen and be changed versus every 3-4 years we have another consulting group saying this is what we need to do and this is what the Black community needs. This information can be directly inputted and changed right away if we really want it to be done. And if there's a board and a rank and file saying to do it, then we should make it happen. That would be one thing. The other thing is I was interested in on the coaching aspect. So when you say this young Black male is being paired up with an officer, one of the things we know is when officers come in, the first thing they tell them is, you follow the code. You never talk. You never go against your training officer. You never go against the team. And that's mostly all teams, so let's not think that that doesn't happen. So when you're having a young male like him coming in, and he's already afraid if he sees something to address it because I'm young, I'm new, what would be the reprisal? What is the process by which you guys have set up for officers, young, old, or whatever, that see something and should report on it but don't? And what's the reprisal on, what's the other aspect of officers who do not turn on their body cam when they have interactions? Those will be my 3 questions, more or less.
So I'll start with the coaching first. The process has changed how we pick coach officers now. They have to meet competencies of a person first as to who is going to show a new officer on what is most important to Toronto Police Service. And really what I want to emphasize here is, the biggest thing that we're trying to change, and we talk about culture change, we talk about what the action looks like, is to change the mindset for officers when they get dispatched to a radio call. So what mindset are they bringing, and do they understand what social positioning is? Do they understand what power is in society? Do they understand what the impact of the uniform is and how to actually show emotional intelligence? So these are the categories, so those things I just mentioned, that we look for in the coach officers, and then they go for a very comprehensive course at the police college where they're taught on how to impart these values to young officers. And more specifically, you asked about the young officer here. He was in my office a few days ago, and that was the same message I imparted not only to the whole group but to this officer, is that they have access to me and any supervisor if there's any issues in how they're being trained. We're trying to create a system of accountability at all levels. And when you talk about body-worn cameras, when somebody doesn't turn it on, that's an automatic disciplinary action right there that will be addressed swiftly. Because the expectation is that no matter what, whatever incident, and as I mentioned before, that's not something that can go hidden. Because when you get dispatched to a call or you're at a certain location, there's a GPS tracking mechanism, the call is recorded, and then there has to be a corresponding record for a body-worn camera footage. And if it's not there, it's investigated, and it's investigated as misconduct, the officer is reprimanded, and then they're made to understand that they're going to use it again. But I tell you, and I go back to your original point that you said 5 years ago, you said that, and you're absolutely right. But it's a journey. And we really are trying to influence our officers in understanding what it means to meet the needs of a community that's marginalized. But what does that actually mean? And if you ask me, what that means is understanding the experience and listening and being ready to understand that there is a power imbalance in society when you're a person of color or you're marginalized, when you step out your front door. And I have these conversations one-on-one with my officers to make sure they understand that that's important to me. And if it's important to me, it's important to you. And I make sure they understand what exactly is I'm telling them, is that they're accountable to me. I'm obviously representing the Chief of Police and the Toronto Police Service, but they're accountable when they attend that radio call and they deal with somebody who's dealing with trauma that you can't see. That's the training we're talking about. To understand, somebody mentioned colonialism, what the impacts of colonialism is to society, and to understand the history and how we got here. So that's what we're trying to teach our officers, is to check that unconscious bias. And that's all part of the coach officer program now, and that's complemented by them actually going in the community, like I mentioned before, and Andrea mentioned it. And you're right, you know, it's not just community leaders, it's dealing and actually interacting with the community and making sure they understand, what does the community want? The community wants us to listen first and understand their experience so we can be better at meeting their needs.
Thank you.
First, gonna go to Uncle. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm with the Jane Finch Concerned Citizens Organization, Winston LaRose. Now, we've gone through this so many times. I want to thank the Jamaican Canadian Association for always making themselves available to facilitate these kind of conversations. But it's very evident that we're not solving any problems. We've been repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So we got a new superintendent, maybe a little bit more energy, and we're talking about the same thing. So we want solutions, right? I'm so glad that the community is involved, but perhaps we do need a community-engaged group that works with the police officers to help to ensure that they understand this community as well as they ought to, rather than coming in thinking that there's a training ground for police officers to move on, and particularly the superintendents, right? They come here and they're all graduate as superintendents. So that's been the tendency that I've been here for 30 years, and that's my observation. I came here with one purpose, to work in the Jane Finch and the difficulties that are here. I've been doing that all the time. So I want to, first of all, thank you for holding this forum and listening as you are to the community. Certainly, Andrea has been around for quite a while. I know all of these communities from Grand Ravine, Shoreham, Driftwood. I've worked in all of them at the grassroots level, right? So if you come in with a mindset that you're going and you have guns on you, right? And the community better obey. I've had officers say that to me as well, right? Don't get in the way, we're going to do what we're going to do. Over the years, it's not quite that, they're not as adamant now. I feel and can see this difference. There's some change, but we still have a long way to go. So I won't take up the time of anybody else, but we just want to say that we'll be working with you, we'll be watching you, and we want to ensure that you do the right thing, right? And it's not about whether you're black or white officers, because we're talking about race. It's a culture that's within the police organization that has been very difficult to deal with. And from the time I worked with Charlie Roach and Dudley Laws downtown, it all worked towards trying to get the police to respect community members, particularly the black members. So that's what race is. We recognize, acknowledge that race exists, and for all the deniers, we all recognize each other. We see what we see, and we know the kind of actions or interactions that have been done to particularly black women, but more particularly black men that have been shot and killed. Okay, thank you much.
There is a follow-up question around data that I do have around this. When we see this chart, it seems to tell us something, but there's a lot of information I think is missing from the conversation that we have. So one of the things is, doesn't tell us who in the force are doing this and disproportionate. Is it on a race-based level? So we may make the assumption that it's white, it may not be. It may be another ethnicity, and then that data should be used to identify training and what's being missing. There's all sorts of different cultural narratives that could be happening outside of the binary ones we are often reinforced. The other thing is it doesn't say where as much. So does that same police officer treat say a black person the same way in Jane and Finch as they would say in Rosedale or downtown Toronto? Is that so the context of which this is happening? Can anyone speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you so much for the questions and the comments today, because it's giving myself and the team a lot of ideas as we strive to continue to go forward and improve our analysis, enhance our analysis, understanding, looking at the data gaps, right? There are a lot of data gaps. We talked about some of it today in terms of what is a use of force and what aren't we collecting, right? And so there are a lot of data gaps we have to acknowledge and work with our partners, particularly in the province, to address, and also within our own systems. And Colin talked about some of the areas he wants to start collecting more data on to understand and track how officers are doing and how communities are experiencing our officers. So going forward, we are going to, and I think Colin mentioned it earlier, expand our view beyond just use of force, right? Beyond just strip searches. There's a lot of types of interactions that have an impact on communities, have an impact on how communities experience police. How are we making arrests? How are, release decisions, release at scene versus taking someone into custody? How are those decisions being made? Is there fairness in those, in how our processes and procedures around those interactions happening? Mental health apprehensions, right? Child welfare apprehensions is another area that we've heard from communities is really important to understand why there are disproportionately more Black children in the welfare system, and what role does policing have in that? What role do schools have in that, right? We all have a role to play in society in different sectors, and we need to understand how we work together and how we can deal with our part in it. And so, as we go forward, we will be looking at neighborhood level, division level analyses to see if there are different trends across the city, where we can improve things at the division level and work with our local divisions, right? So recently, we've added resources on the team to allow us to do that, because it's going to require a lot of work and a lot of these engagements with you, so that you can be the ones kind of driving those questions based on your lived experiences and based on what is happening in your neighborhoods. And so that takes time, that takes the commitment that you talked about. It takes the trust that you have in us, even to come out tonight, right, on this snowy night, to have a conversation with us in the hopes that it's going to make a difference. And so we hope that, that investment you made in us tonight and the investment we made, also will lead us somewhere positive. And I thank you for that. I'm writing notes as we go along. And when we have conversations around the table later on, we're going to take it all away, and we're going to report back next year what we heard from all of these town halls to make sure that it's out there in the public. And I wanted to, Patrick asked, one of his first questions is, where is this data? How is it being used? So I want to get back to that. We are going to publish open data. That means that the data gets back to the communities. You guys can look at the data yourself. You guys can use the data, and look at it to answer your questions. Right? And so that's our commitment to transparency. That's our commitment to, this is your data, right? We collect it, like it's police are collecting the data, but at the end of the day, it's about our interactions with you. And police are here to serve communities. That data is there to serve you.
So I know that I think you have additional narrative, and I know I see one person who's about to ask questions, so I just wanted you to sneak in your comments.
So just there's we had a community advisory panel, and they asked many of the questions that you're asking. Like, is it white men that are white male officers who are using force on Black people more? Is it younger officers? Is it gender? What is it? And we tried to answer that question. So we had something like 100 different questions that the community advisory panel came up with, just free fire, right? And probably a lot of those questions are on your minds, some of which we could answer. I think we got to about 25 of them. To answer, we couldn't answer the race question because we don't have good data. I know this sounds weird, but we don't have good data on our own officers and their racial identity, how they identify, because we have to ask them to self-identify and can't use that data. There's issues around that. But we looked at age, and it wasn't younger officers or recent officers, and there was no disproportionality there. And it didn't seem to be gender either. So it was more what was happening. The other thing that was super interesting is mental health, and the intersection of mental health and race was a huge factor. Right? So the disproportionality overall in going from interaction to use of force was 1.6 for Black people. But if you look at people who were in crisis or mental health cases, it was 1.9. So almost 90% more for people who are in mental health. So I think we need to have a conversation about that, and how do we help deal with folks who are in crisis, in mental health issues, and how officers need to change the way we approach those folks. So super interesting result there. But when you looked at things like holdups, gun crime, et cetera, the disproportionality dropped to 1.2 or 20% overage, which, while bad, is not nearly as bad as the 1.9. So that says where we got to put our energy and our focus is around our mental health policy. There's a whole bunch of hypotheses or questions that were put to us as a team that were basically, they didn't pan out. They didn't, there was nothing there. And it's not as exciting to get a negative result, but still, we disproved a lot of stuff, that it wasn't this, that, or the other. And in terms of neighborhoods, what we were finding was that we just didn't have enough data in some neighborhoods to get good results on those neighborhoods. So we're extending the length of time we're studying this to try and get enough data points to be able to do that analysis.
Sorry, can I just have a really quick, just timekeeping? We have one last question. We're going to go into a breakout session afterwards. Yeah, there isn't anyone. Okay, so we really want you to go to the mic, just because the people online can't hear you when you're standing. Sir, please just bear with us. The only problem is that we're running out of time to do the breakout, and so the individuals that are online are also going to do a breakout session. So if we can just do this one last question, do the breakout, we will have that conversation with you. Okay?
Is it okay if it wasn't going to be a quick question.
How quick?
No, something tells me.
Okay, right after her, can you do that?
I don't want to deal with the assumption.
Okay. All right, just, you have to go to the mic. You have to go to
my name is Jane, and my question is simple. It regards the body cameras. I just want to know, is there any statistics that shows number of police officers where the body cameras didn't work, or due to the default, or because they didn't just put them on? And another question is that how can I know if the police officer's body camera is working and I can trust him and communicate with him with trust? Thank you.
Okay, so the we ran an audit. We have a team that just does audits, and we ran an audit specifically on body-worn camera usage and how many times it's turned off or how many times it malfunctions and isn't turned on for an interaction. It is extremely low. It's sub 1%, if I recall correctly. The other part is it has a flashing light on it when it's on. So you can Google it, like, when do I know that an Axon body camera is on? It has visual indicators when it's on and also when it's muted.
Yeah, that's right, and the light is red. So when the light is flashing red, it's an indication that it's recording.
Wait, sorry. There's a queue. I could go now?
Okay, I have a quick question. My name's Alicia. I'm Mothers with Hope, and I'm also with Black Creek as well. The question is, the officers that are here, and then you guys move them out of the community, I know some of them, it's because you guys send them somewhere else to be like a sergeant or whatever, a captain. But if they're doing so well in the community, why don't they just get a promotion within the 31 division instead of sending them to 32 or 12 division, whatever, make them get their promotion in the community where they're at?
So it's an excellent point, and I think you'll have a lot of officers that would actually like to nominate you as their captain. But what I will tell you is it's done because they have found, and this is studies, that it's very difficult to become a supervisor with people that you've been working with especially as the first rank of sergeant. So it's an opportunity for them to go work with a new set of colleagues where they can now take that next step. And what you'll find is most of them will actually end up coming back once they have formed that confidence that they can separate themselves from being that colleague and friend to now being a supervisor where you have to hold people accountable and have difficult conversations. And I think you'll agree it's difficult when you know the person and you have been previously a friend the day before. But you know, you make an excellent point, and I've had conversations with the chief myself, is we need to put the right people in the right place, especially when they have interaction with the community where they're invested. Like, for example, there was an officer, Nov16.
Yes, we know Nelson.
And he
Yes.
celebrated, right? And he actually came to see me, and he wants to come back to 31.
And Brian, Officer
And
Brian.
I can already tell from people there, and perhaps
Officer
the deputy, as he hears this,
Officer Gale's gone.
can make it happen. But no, your point's well taken, and you're absolutely right, because if there was, that's right, we do need that, and continuity is a big piece.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. I know there has to be a break. There has to be.
Really quick.
One, and then that's it.
This is one and done? Okay.
Yeah, I've been waiting for a long time. Yeah,
Fair enough.
very
The floor is
patient.
yours. The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
So it's comment and a really quick question. So I guess I'll start with the question. So it's really quick. How can we actively get involved in these processes? But it's very different. People are not expecting this. Pattern, this is the symbol. The founder has a chair in this building. Now, the same is a pattern, not the same people, but there's a pattern that the people who are telling you, have suggestions for you, do not practice those own things. I mentioned it earlier. They're asking you for accountability and transparency. We don't get it in the community. So I address both things because it is both, right? So whatever is going to go on, I'm making that comment. A lot of the stuff that people are saying, I'm hearing that they have a closer relation. They have a closer relationship with you all than they do with me. And I'm a Garveyite. That's an issue. But how, so to cut all of that, waste my time, come Canada, how can I get involved then? Because all these barriers, as soon as the barriers is gone, let's do it, right? And we're the ones talking about anti-racism, equality, and justice, so I don't have to be afraid to be assertive. Okay. So, okay, thanks for rushing me.
I'm sorry, I just...
No, it's
I
okay,
just- yeah.
it's okay. That's what happens in the community, and you want to hide it, but let's go, let's go.
Okay.
So I'm just going to try and answer that.
Yeah,
if
fair
I
enough.
can. So I think there's a mediated relationship. So there's somebody in the middle, and then there's an unmediated relationship where we're actually hearing from and talking to everybody or anybody who wants to be in the conversation. And a lot of the folks in the room are the mediators, right? We talk about that as you've got roles in community organizations, and so the question is, okay, how do we scale this, right?
Sorry, because we hear it from you sooner than we hear it from them.
Right, but
So-
I think that's
I think-
true broadly.
I think what you're hinting at is about community engagement, right? As a community, are we engaging ourselves, or are we engaging institutions as opposed to engaging with the community? And it's important. This is an important thing because I've seen this in other areas where you can have a loud minority because you're not engaging the community as a whole. For us to actually mobilize and really have strong voices within all the institutions, we need to be coming together as communities, which means listening to different opinions, different ideas, and then coming as a unified front saying these are the clear things that we want and moving together. I think that's what you're hinting at, no?
Well, that should be an obvious, but what's going on is that the people who, historically, and this is the symbol, the people who align closer with the system, they perpetuate a whole shit that people are trying to hide, that, okay, we're closer to the system, so you have leadership or this and that, and then Garveyites are asking the question, you're a leader, practice what you preach, right? These people have to bow down to transparency and accountability. Be transparent and accountable, because I'm a Garveyite, I don't care. I have nothing to hide. As far as that, it's truth and reconciliation. All right.
Okay, taken. Okay, so now we're moving into the section where we're going to all sit down by themes. We have 3 themes: governance and procedures, training, and monitoring. And I think we can facilitate that at the back, right? And so you're going to bring your chairs, and so that there will be stakeholders. Are you guys going to be participating as well?
If we're invited.
Yes, you're invited. And to sit down and talk, so we can actually have more deep, meaningful. And then there's food. And there's food at the back, so please indulge. And also there are online, there is a process. Rose, you want to speak to online?
So those individuals who are online right now will be given instructions, but at the present time, we really just want you to go to one table and whichever one you're most interested in, and we will actually continue the discussion and get the feedback.
Thanks. Yeah, that one, that last one was it. It was not good.
Yeah, there was.
Started. You hear it? Okay, welcome everyone. I would like to welcome all of our online viewers to the 2022 Race and Identity-Based Data Town Hall session. So in this session, we'll be sharing what we're doing to drive change and how we're moving forward. Okay. Here we'll be sharing what we're doing to drive change and how we're moving forward. We are seeking input from you to provide feedback on the 38 action items put forward to address the outcomes of the 2020 Use of Force and Strip Search report and continuously improve. As we walk through the next three themes that I'll present on the screen, please feel free to put in your questions and your feedback into the YouTube chat. I have been monitoring throughout this entire time, and so I will make sure to put them up on the screen for all of you to see and read them out loud. We will spend about 7 to 8 minutes per theme, short on time, so about 25 minutes in total for this whiteboard session to discuss each theme. Your questions and comments will be addressed following this breakout session. If you do have additional feedback, please scan the QR code to the left over here or email us with your comments and questions at the equityinclusion@torontopolice.om.ca email inbox. I am just going to zoom into the RBDC, that's the race-based data collection QR code here for the community survey, just for anyone to be able to put it on your phone so you can have that link. I'll keep it here for a few seconds. Okay, excellent. So I do want to thank you all in advance for sharing your perspectives and your lived experiences. And with that said, we will get started on the first theme. Okay. So theme number 1 this evening, as it was already mentioned, is governance, procedures, and workflow. This theme relates to police accountability, auditing, procedures, and processes. So what you'll see here on the left-hand side, we have a few action items that have already been complete, and then we have the action items below in the red box that are for feedback. Our focus this evening, we would love to hear back from you, your thoughts specifically on the 4 feedback action items. Any comments that you may have, but most importantly, what you think is missing or what you think needs to be added or removed from these action items. So I will read them out loud for everyone. So the complete action items are review of in-camera and body-worn camera for all use of force incidents, improve auditing at management level for strip searches, change use of force procedure, and improve reporting on use of force and strip searches. The action items for feedback this evening are review of non-emergency calls to divert to alternative service providers, develop a TPS equity strategy, review committees for use of force and strip searches to include EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion representatives, and finally, improve identification of risk, non-compliance, and assessment of root causes through an audit supervisor at each division. So I am currently monitoring the chat on YouTube and making sure that any comments or questions come through regarding these 4 feedback action items for the following theme. I will use different sticky notes to reflect your comments and your questions. In the meantime, I did make note of a few comments that were coming through throughout the conversation so far. So I'm going to start by posting them up on the screen. I will use the pink sticky notes over here to put in all the comments that have come in so far. Okay, so the first comment that we have here is all reported use of force incidents will go to the data, baton or gun use reports from hospitals, not rough ups. Okay, so another comment that we have here is regarding having more governance. Okay. Another comment that came through during the conversation. Okay. I'm just going to read this one out loud again. So everything gets investigated, but there is different levels of oversight on each of uses of force incidents. Interesting. Okay, there's a few more comments that have come through. Okay, the next comment that was mentioned throughout the conversation, this is a learn by learn panel discussion. Not a lot of communities will understand the logical use of data. Another comment that we had come through, I think the panel has to try to move away from the logics and from the logistics and data in a way. Community is more into understanding how the use of force is dealt with. Okay, we did have a question that came through regarding this theme in earlier conversations. So I'm going to switch to a blue sticky note here to represent the questions. All right. So body-worn cameras are always on, that's great, but how much does the person involved in the incident would know where to make a report? Thank you for that. Right, so I will give everyone just a couple of more minutes, and I'll reread the 4 feedback action items to give you an opportunity to provide some feedback or comments or questions on any of them. So once again, the action items for feedback: review of non-emergency calls to divert to alternative service providers, develop a TPS equity strategy, review committees for use of force and strip searches to include equity, diversity, and inclusion representatives, and finally, improve identification of risk, non-compliance, and assessment of root causes to an audit supervisor at each division. I know that throughout the conversation earlier on, somebody had asked if we are reading the comments from the YouTube chat. So the answer to that is definitely yes. I'm monitoring the YouTube chat and I'm happy to post any of your comments or questions. So if there are any further comments or questions on these specific action items, primarily the focus, we would love to hear from all of you. Is there anything that you believe is missing and needs to be added in these action items when it comes to governance theme? Which once again, I will scroll up to the top here, relates to police accountability, auditing, procedures, and processes. Just a couple of more minutes. Okay. So what I'll do is we'll move on to theme number 2, and we can always come back to the first theme. All right, so theme number 2 is on training and education. This theme relates to improving member training to include an equity focus. So once again, there are some action items that have already been complete, and those are mandatory training on anti-Black racism and Indigenous experience, including third-party bias, specialized equity, diversity, and inclusion instructors, not police officers, to develop and lead the training, improve training on use of force and strip searches, intercultural development training, and anti-bias workshops for senior leaders. The action items are currently in progress, and we would love to get some feedback. Any comments, questions, concerns are the following: implement fair and impartial policing course, community and academic review of training curriculum, adverse childhood experience training for all officers, enhanced coach officer training course, active bystandership course, specialized training for crime analysts and 911 call takers, revised probationary constable program to ensure community experience. Alright, so I do have a few comments from earlier, so I'm just going to get started here. Again, just using the pink sticky note for all of the comments. Alright, so the the first comment here is, so if they have PTSI and we have PTSD, why is there a lack of empathy? 1 week in the community is the bare minimum. You cannot genuinely protect and service a community unless you get to know them. Thank you for that. The second comment. It makes sense for police to join the communities. We've got a new one here in the chat. Okay, the newest comment here, maybe considering about expanding the police auxiliary program, which include paid auxiliary officers and recruit from the community that serve the community where they're originally from. This is great, thank you so much. Okay, the next comment we have here, it makes sense for police to join the communities. Comment. Okay, the next comment here is understandable that when accepting the position, there needs to be a term length commitment. When the term ends, it should be existing officer introducing the new officer into the community. 2 years is not unreasonable. Okay, we've got another comment here. Okay. The Canadian police need to hire more from the Jamaican and Caribbean community from these neighborhoods. Okay. So just about a minute more to see if there's any more questions coming through regarding any of these in-progress action items in particular before we move on to theme 3. Oh, my apologies, this one is a duplicate. Okay, so about a minute more for the in-progress action items. I'll read them again. Implement fair and impartial policing course, community and academic review of training curriculum, adverse childhood experience training for all officers, enhanced coach officer training course, active bystandership course, specialized training for crime analysts and 911 call takers, and revised probationary constable program to ensure community experience. Adding in one more comment. Emotional intelligence is important. Okay, so I will move on to the final theme this evening. So theme 3 is monitoring, and this theme relates to monitoring and transparent evaluation to make sure that we are accountable. So the action items that have been completed are work with other police services to improve use of force reporting, improve reporting for strip searches, and open analytics for use of force and strip search data. The action items that we are seeking your feedback and input are the following. Measure race and other points of police contact, collect member diversity and demographic data, develop a post-interaction survey with communities, analyze other outcomes for arrested persons, including diversions, booking, protective, and frisk searches, assess equity impacts for crime management plans, revise officer performance reports to include a community focus, including referrals and diversions, review existing corporate risk management reports to include non-race information on use of force reports, And finally, conduct multi-year analysis on use of force and strip searches to assess the actions and changes we are making. So I'm taking a look at the chat for any of your comments or questions coming through. So we did have a comment from earlier. Right, on the importance of building a system of accountability. So we'll spend a few minutes on this theme. Again, any feedback or questions regarding the 4 feedback action items in the red box. So I will just reread for everyone again the 4 feedback action items. Measure race and other points of police contact, collect member diversity and demographic data, develop a post-interaction survey with communities, analyze other outcomes for arrested persons, including diversions, booking, protective and frisk searches, assess equity impacts for crime management plans, revise officer performance reports to include a community focus, including referrals and diversions, and review existing corporate risk management reports to include non-race information on use of force reports, conduct multi-year analysis on use of force and strip searches to assess the actions and changes we are making. So if you have any feedback or input or questions regarding these action items, please let it be known in the chat, and I can post it here for our panel to address after the session. This is great. We got a comment here, observing information and take disciplinary actions. Thank you. Okay, and I have one last one here. Knowledge building information. Okay. So before we get cut back to the live town hall, I just want to make sure we do a quick recap. All right. So theme 1, the governance, procedures, and the workflow relating to police accountability, auditing procedures and processes. If anyone would like to add anything, any feedback or comments, questions on these action items. Switching on to theme 2 on training and education about improving our member training to include an equity focus. So if there's anything anyone would like to add regarding the in-progress action items. I'm just going to go back one last time to the final theme of monitoring, relating to monitoring and transparent evaluation to make sure that we are accountable. If there are any questions or input or suggestions anyone would like to provide regarding our action items. So once again, I just want to thank everyone for sharing your perspectives and your lived experiences. If you do have further feedback for us, please feel free to email us at theequityinclusion@torontopolice.om.ca. And once again, I'm just going to zoom into here on the QR code for our race-based data collection community survey. And thank you again for your participation. I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone, for just returning back to your seat.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Hi. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for a wonderful evening, insightful. We have hard work ahead of us. We have hard work ahead of us. We need your insights, we need your perceptions, we need you. And thank you for being here today and tonight. We just want to wrap up by just having closing statements from the operational stakeholders. Mai, would you like to take the floor?
Sure, I guess the closing statements start with me. Yeah, I can't tell you enough how grateful I am for you to be here and share with us, and it doesn't end here, right? So we are continuing the work. There's 5 more town halls, but outside of the town halls, you'll see our email address on some of the handouts that you have on the screen up above us. Please email us as well. Reach out to us and the team. There's going to be more happening around the race and identity-based data collection strategies, so follow us. We're going to have more engagements, and there's going to be opportunities for other forums to continue to hear from you.
So before, yes. Woo! Before we jump into the next closing, I just been informed that there are, what is it, 1 or 2 questions? 2 questions. It's a wrap up. Oh, I thought it was a question. Okay, so it's a final wrap up?
Okay.
Okay, then that means the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're going to be after.
I see.
After him and then. Cool, got you.
So just want to reiterate the commitment from me at 31 Division. You know, like I mentioned, we're truly invested, and my officers are invested, and I'm going to take back a lot of the things that were discussed here, specifically around continuity, around how the community invests in our officers, and how the expectation is that they stay there and invest back with the communities, and that's always an ongoing discussion. Plus, also allowing different community members here. Every month we have a community police liaison committee meeting at 31 Division, and we're hoping to take that into many different community centers across the division. I encourage you to come out to these meetings because we truly need to hear from the voices of the people that live and thrive in these communities so that we can be better informed on what we can do and how we can do it. And I truly mean that. So after we're done here, I'll stick around. If that's something you're interested in, I'll give you my business card, and I assure you that you'll have a seat at that table. And that's not just, you know, for things for us to hear that we're doing well. I want to hear things that we're not doing well, because that's truly how we get better. And I'm truly invested, and I thank you for allowing me specifically a seat here to speak to you. And thank you, obviously, to be in the same space to hear so many great sentiments and ideas. And thank you for everything.
Colin, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. I'll be brief. Thank you all for being here. This was for me to come and to listen, to share what we understand about what insights we've gained. And where we're trying to move the solutions, and to get you to sound off on that, to modify, to change what we're doing. And I've heard a bunch of things which I can really use and put to good use with the command, and making the changes to the police service that you're asking for. So super helpful, and thank you very much.
We have some community leaders to close off the evening.
Okay. So just want to thank everyone for being here and for participating in the conversation. This has been, some pieces, difficult conversation because it is quite triggering, yes? And so one of the things that CAFCAN would like you to be aware of is that we do offer mental health support services, trauma counseling. Counseling services is available to the community. There are things that we need to deal with. Some of our interactions with the police have been difficult, have been very hard on this community. And so we want you to know that CAFCAN is here for you, walking with you, standing with you. And services are available, so please reach out to us. There is support available. Thank you. And thank you once again for being here.
I had some youth ask me some questions, but I think I'm going to put it into like suggestion-based model, if that makes sense. As a community leader, but as well as somebody that works in this community, I think what we're asking for primarily is a community-centered and a community-focused approach when worrying about or talking about how we're being communicated with, right? And I think a lot of our youth particularly have a very negative taste or idea of what policing looks like, primarily because of personal experience or learned experiences from either our elders or our own like way of living. And I think one thing that we're really asking for and persisting for is continual conversation about anti-Blackness, anti-indigeneity, as well as equity-based approaches in the way that we interact with folks. A lot of the times we have conversation about a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and in this community, there's a specific culture in the way that we speak and the way that we interact with one another. And when we have officers revolving so often outside of our communities, they don't end up learning how we talk and how to communicate with us. And at the end of the day, we just want to be heard as well as communicated with and not talked at, but just being able to be included in the conversation of what our safety looks like when in regards to the police.
Thank you. I just want to continue that narrative that this has been a really insightful evening, and I really have to say thank you to each one of you for opening up yourself, your thoughts, your insights, and offering them to us and the institutions. For me personally, I'm not part of TPS, but this is the second town hall, and I have to say I'm happy that consistently I'm hearing that there's a partnership that we can build. There's a partnership. No one wins when we're divided. We don't want to be under police. We don't want to be over police. We want to be protected. We want our children to come home, and we want to thrive. And we want to do that together. And so I thank you all for actually listening, and I thank you all for actually listening. And if there's additional questions you have around race-based data, what does data mean? Who's making it up? How does this impact us? We need to be exploring that more. It's not one and done. Our community is everyone's community. Everyone's a part of the community, and we need to be doing and building better. Thank you so much.
So that's what just want to say. Oh, mic is on still, sorry. Just want to say to everybody, and of course to the panel, a great discussion, a lot of frankness, and Claudia, you did an awesome job. Thanks, everyone. I think this is obviously the beginning of a conversation, one that has been going on, by the way, a long time. I talked about it a long time ago, saying when the JC was created back in 1962, this was a challenge. Still is. So, and that's why I said we just got to keep at it, because it's going to take a long time for us to overcome all the challenges. We talk about it in different ways, but it's systemic. It's not going to just go away like that. So obviously this is useful work, necessary work, and work that we're going to continue. The JC on its own, we're going to also try to help with the data work in terms of just allowing people to better be able to understand, especially when it becomes an open data where everybody can access it. It would be good to know how to use it. So we're going to try to help there.